The mist clung to the earth like a spectral veil, swirling between the gnarled trees of Blackwood Hollow. The village lay nestled at the forest's edge, its cottages huddled close, their thatched roofs dripping with evening dew. A hush had settled over the land, save for the distant hoot of an owl and the rustling of unseen creatures lurking just beyond the firelight's reach. At the heart of the village lived Elias Thorne, a young stableman known for his gentle nature and unshakable bond with horses. His hands, calloused from years of labor, could soothe even the most restless of steeds. But none had captured his heart like Lysandra, the mare he had raised from birth, a creature of striking beauty with a coat as black as a moonless night and eyes that gleamed like polished obsidian. Lysandra was no ordinary horse. She moved with an almost unnatural grace, her breath misting in the air even when the night was warm. The villagers whispered of enchantments, of old bloodlines tainted with magic, but Elias dismissed such tales. She was his closest companion, his solace in a world that had taken much from him. But the peace they shared was not to last. A sinister arrival. One fateful evening, a stranger rode into the village. Cloaked in tattered black robes, his face was shrouded beneath a hood, revealing only the gleam of hollow, sunken eyes. His presence sent a chill through the townsfolk, who hurried to bar their doors and douse their lanterns. Elias, tending to Lysandra in the stables, barely noticed the stranger's approach until the heavy scent of damp earth filled his nostrils. He turned to find the man standing at the threshold, his bony fingers resting on the wooden frame. "You care for that mare as if she were your own blood," the stranger murmured, his voice like rustling dead leaves. Elias squared his shoulders, instinctively stepping between the man and his beloved steed. "She is," he replied firmly. The stranger's lips curled into something resembling a smile. "A fine beast, but beauty such as hers does not belong in the hands of a mere stableman." Anger flared in Elias's chest. "She belongs to no one but herself." The stranger chuckled, the sound dry and hollow. "You do not know what you possess, boy." He turned on his heel, the hem of his cloak sweeping over the straw-laden ground. "But you will soon enough." And with that, he disappeared into the night. The curse unleashed. That night, a terrible storm rolled over Blackwood Hollow. The wind howled through the trees, rattling windows and shaking rooftops. Lysandra, usually fearless, pawed at the ground, her nostrils flaring in distress. Elias, sensing her unease, stayed with her in the stables, whispering reassurances into her ear. But as the midnight hour struck, a change came over her. Her muscles tensed, her eyes burned with an eerie red glow, and a deep, guttural sound rumbled from her throat. Then, without warning, she reared onto her hind legs, kicking wildly. Elias barely had time to react before she bolted. The stable doors burst open, as if an unseen force had thrown them wide, and Lysandra galloped into the storm, her black mane whipping in the wind. Heart hammering in his chest, Elias chased after her. The rain lashed at his face, mud clung to his boots, but he would not let her vanish into the night. Through the twisted paths of Blackwood Hollow, he ran, calling her name. And then he saw her. She stood at the edge of a clearing, her body trembling, her breath coming in ragged gasps. But she was not alone. The stranger was there, standing beneath the gnarled limbs of an ancient, blackened tree. His hands moved in slow, deliberate gestures, lips forming words in a language Elias did not understand. The air crackled with unseen energy. "Stop!" Elias shouted, his voice barely carrying over the storm's fury. The stranger's gaze snapped to him, and for the first time, Elias saw the full horror of his face, gaunt, withered, his skin like parchment stretched too thin over bone. His eyes, empty yet knowing, burned with an unnatural light. "You cannot stop what has already begun," the sorcerer intoned. "She was never meant to be yours. Lysandra let out a piercing shriek, her body convulsing as dark veins spread beneath her skin. Her form twisted, shifting, something unnatural awakening within her. Elias lunged forward, desperation fueling his limbs. But as he reached for her, an unseen force hurled him backward, his body crashing against the damp earth. Stars exploded behind his eyes, and as his vision swam, he heard the stranger's final whisper, soft, yet filled with dark promise. The bewitched mare will ride at dawn, and with her, the curse shall awaken. Then darkness. Elias awoke to the scent of damp earth and the sound of distant thunder rumbling through Blackwood Hollow. His body ached from where he had been thrown, but the pain in his chest was far worse. He scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding like war drums against his ribs. Lysandra was gone. The clearing was empty, save for the ancient, blackened tree that loomed like a skeletal specter against the gray dawn sky. The storm had passed, leaving behind a thick, oppressive mist that clung to the forest floor like the remnants of a nightmare. Elias clenched his fists. The stranger had taken her, his mare his friend, the only family he had left. The sorcerer's last words rang in his ears. The bewitched mare will ride at dawn, and with her, the curse shall awaken. The curse. He had never believed in the old tales, in the whispers of dark sorcery that lurked in the forgotten corners of the world. But now he had no choice. Lysandra was in danger, and he would not rest until he brought her home. A warning from the elders. Elias stumbled back to the village, his clothes soaked, his limbs heavy with exhaustion. By the time he reached the square, the sun had risen, casting an eerie golden light over the cobbled streets. The villagers were gathered, murmuring in hushed voices, their faces pale with unease. At the center of the crowd stood Elder Rowan, the wisest and oldest among them, his weathered hands clutching an iron-tipped staff. "You saw him, didn't you?" the old man rasped, his gaze piercing. Elias nodded. "The sorcerer," he took Lysandra. "He spoke of a curse." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A woman clutched her shawl tighter around her shoulders. An old man muttered a prayer under his breath. Elder Rowan exhaled slowly, his expression grim. "The curse of the Blackwood." Elias felt his blood turn cold. "Tell me." Rowan hesitated, then motioned for Elias to follow. The villagers stepped aside as they made their way toward the elder's home, a small, candlelit cottage nestled at the base of the great oak tree that had stood in the village for centuries. Inside, Rowan pulled an old, leather-bound tome from the shelf, its cover marked with strange symbols. He turned the pages with care, stopping at an illustration that made Elias's stomach twist. It was a drawing of a mare, a magnificent black steed, much like Lysandra, but her eyes burned red, and dark tendrils of smoke coiled from her hooves like living shadows. Beside her stood a cloaked figure, his skeletal hand resting on her neck. Elias swallowed hard. "What does it mean?" Rowan's voice was heavy with sorrow. "Long ago, a powerful sorcerer lived in these woods. He was betrayed by those he loved, left to die in the heart of the forest. But before his final breath, he wove a curse, a vengeance that would pass through generations. His spirit was bound to a black mare, a creature of unparalleled beauty and strength. When the time came, she would rise, and with her he would return to finish what he started." Elias's hands curled into fists. "You think Lysandra is that mare?" Rowan's eyes were dark with certainty. "The signs are there. The way she moves, the way she looks at you, she is no ordinary steed." Elias shook his head. "No, Lysandra is good. She would never bring harm to anyone." Rowan's face softened. "Perhaps, but if the sorcerer's spirit has awakened within her, she may not have a choice." A heavy silence hung between them. Then Elias straightened, determination hardening his gaze. "Tell me how to stop it." Rowan hesitated before flipping to another page. It showed a dagger, its blade engraved with symbols of protection. There is only one way. The cursed one must be severed from this world before the transformation is complete. Elias's breath caught in his throat. You mean you want me to kill her? Rowan's silence was answer enough. Elias shoved the book away. No. There has to be another way. Rowan sighed. If you do not act soon, she will not be the Mare you once knew. The sorcerer will claim her entirely. Elias turned, storming toward the door. I won't let that happen. The search begins. Elias did not know where the sorcerer had taken Lysandra, but he knew one thing. He would not stand by and let her become a vessel for darkness. Armed with only his courage and an iron dagger tucked into his belt, he set out into Blackwood Hollow once more. The villagers watched in silence as he disappeared into the trees, their expressions a mix of fear and pity. The deeper he ventured, the more the forest changed. The trees grew taller, their branches twisted into unnatural shapes. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of decay. Shadows moved where there should have been none. Then he heard it, a distant whinny, low and haunting, carried on the wind. Lysandra! Elias broke into a run, his heart pounding. The sound grew louder, more desperate. And then he saw her. She stood at the edge of a dark lake, its surface still as glass. The sorcerer stood beside her, his hands raised, his voice weaving an incantation that sent shivers down Elias's spine. Lysandra! Elias shouted. The mare's head snapped toward him, her eyes flickering between familiar warmth and unnatural red fire. The sorcerer turned, a slow, knowing smile spreading across his face. You are persistent, boy, but it is too late. She belongs to me now. Elias drew the iron dagger. I'm taking her back. The sorcerer laughed, low and cruel. Foolish child, you cannot fight fate. The ground trembled. The waters of the lake began to ripple. Lysandra let out a pained cry, her body convulsing as the dark magic coursed through her veins. Her form shifted, tendrils of shadow curling from her hooves. No! Elias ran forward, but the sorcerer lifted his hand, and Elias was thrown backward by an unseen force. The last thing he saw was Lysandra's eyes, burning, pleading. And then darkness swallowed them whole.